Hey Run Junkies, recently I have returned to training exclusively by heart rate. Now this isn't something I ever really stopped doing once I started a few years ago. It is a metric that I have been watching throughout my training for the last few years. But now that I've started the Goofy Challenge training in 39.3 miles for the half and the full marathon at Walt Disney World, I am rededicating myself to train exclusively by this metric. But what does that mean? What does it mean to train by heart rate? What are the challenges? What are the benefits? What is the point? What might you gain out of training by heart rate? Today, I am going to answer those questions and many more and show you a little bit about how it looks to train by heart rate in practice and how it applies to me personally and how you can take it into your training. Now, let me start by saying one thing. Training by heart rate is hard. Not physically hard, because that's not the point. The idea is that training by heart rate is actually much easier on your body. If you train in those lower zones, you are not putting as much stress on the body. However, in order to train in those lower zones and in those lower heart rates, you have to slow down to a point that you might not be comfortable with, that you're not used to. That is the mentally challenging part. Now, you may have heard it said, and I know I have said it myself, that many runners will take their easy runs too hard and their hard runs too easy. In fact, many runners will spend the majority of their time in those middle zones, and that is too hard to train consistently without risking overtraining and injury. So if we slow down a little bit, we are reducing our risk of injury. Now, generally speaking, heart rate training is designed to build your aerobic base. What that basically means is that you are building your endurance. You are training yourself to run forever. And so this is particularly useful for people who are running at that half marathon, full marathon, even ultra marathon distance. If you slow it down, you can run at that pace all day. And in order to do that, we do slow our training runs way down. And then we take each workout and we have a specific heart rate target that we want to hit. That's not to say that every single run is going to be in those low zones. There will be specific sets in specific workouts where you do get up into those higher zones. That's what trains those fast twitch muscles, and that's what gets you faster. But training in that lower zone really builds the aerobic base and that endurance over long distances. Okay, so a common question I hear is, well, if I'm training at these slower paces all the time in these low heart rate zones, how am I gonna get any faster? All right, the issue is that somewhere in our heads, we got the idea that we have to run at a certain pace for every mile all the time, or at least be close. Right? We think, our brains think, well, we should be faster. That's just you comparing yourself to what you think you should be doing. The thing with heart rate training is that our bodies are telling us how fast we should be working on any given day in any given workout. Training by heart rate allows adaptations to take effect without putting too much stress on the body. And too much stress leads to overtraining and injury. This is particularly important when you are training for those longer distances. With a high mileage training plan like that, you have a lot of mileage. You have a long way to go and a long time to get there. And training with this philosophy in mind will help you get there healthy. So let's define what heart rate zone training is. This is the philosophy I'm using. A lot of training plans will refer to zone training, zone 1, zone 2, zone 5, all of those kinds of things. So let's break that down a little bit. First off, you need to determine your maximum heart rate, and that can present a little bit of a challenge. So let me walk you through a few ways to do that. First, you can go to your doctor and have them, under their supervision, run you through a runner's stress test. That is the most accurate and scientific way to get that done. Not everybody can do that. In fact, I know of very few people who have actually done that. The other option is 220 minus your age. You've probably heard of this formula. Unfortunately, science is also discovering that that equation is wildly inaccurate for most runners, especially if you've been running for a long time. If you are new to running, that might be a great place to start, but you may also find that as you gain fitness, those zones are not going to be accurate anymore. So the third option that I'm presenting to you is doing a field test or a treadmill test. I am leaving a link to a couple of those different field tests in the description below. But now that we have our maximum heart rate, I'm gonna take you to the whiteboard because we gotta figure out our zones. Now, once you know your maximum heart rate, you can take that number and divide it into percentages, and there are your zones. Now, depending on the philosophy, these numbers may flex a little bit in certain directions. This just happens to be the scale I use for most of my training. So zone 1, super easy, very low effort. Zone 2, you're kind of in that long run all day pace. Somewhere in here, this is where that magic is happening. That endurance, that base building happens down here. Zone 3 is an aerobic zone, also known as a tempo zone. So you might do a lot of your race pace miles in this zone. Zone 4 is your short speed work, and zone 5, you're redlining it. So the higher you go, the less time your body is physically capable of maintaining that high heart rate. And the longer you spend up there, the more time in recovery you're gonna need. Therefore, if you stay in these lower zones, you are going to recover faster in between your runs. Now let me show you how this applies to my personal physiology and what I have discovered of myself as a 45-year-old mother runner. Now I use a Garmin Forerunner 735 XT, and I also have the Forerunner 235, and I'm able to program both of these devices by heart rate and time. And that's basically what I'm doing throughout my current training cycle. So if you want to know about how to actually program your Garmin, you can click on this video right here. So here's how my zones break down. I may have this off, but I wanted you to see how this looks in practice. For my easy runs, I have programmed all of my easy runs to come in somewhere in this area here. So zone 1, I try to stay here, 120 to 141, and I really try to warm up here. So my warm up and cool down, I really try to stay right here. But for the meat of my workout, I will allow myself to go up to 150 beats per minute because that keeps me in zone 2. So if I accidentally bump up a little bit, I'm still in zone 2 without crossing up into this tempo zone. So if I stay under 150 beats per minute for the majority of my runs, I'm still working that easy training zone without overdoing it. In the first week and a half of my training plan, my zone 1, zone 2 runs have come in around 17, 18-minute miles. Yeah, let's just call it 17-minute miles. But I did a tempo run last week that averaged around 12 to 13-minute miles. I'm gonna call it 12:30, all right? Look at that. Look at the difference in minutes between being down here and being up here. 4.5, 5 minutes, you guys. Are you seeing how this works? So then if I do zone 4, zone 5, I've actually done some of these miles as well, some of this work as well. Those average paces are coming in under 10-minute miles, okay? So there's almost a 7-minute difference between my zone 1 and my zone 5 pace, okay? So it's not that I am running slower to live at the slower pace. I'm running slower so I can get to these when I need them, when it counts. So here's what it looks like to actually see this in practice and the results of me training in these lower zones with a little bit up in these higher zones. As you can see, I spent more than 80% of my time in those zones 1 and 2, and less than 20% of that time in zones 3 and up. And that's the point. So when you are taking into account and looking at your data, this is really what we want to see in a healthy heart rate training cycle. Looks crazy, right? Nuts. Now, a lot of runners will take issue with the idea that we have to slow down during training, that I don't want to get slower, I want to get faster. It's going to take me forever to finish these miles, and oh my gosh, how boring is that? Well, yes, Speaking from experience, yeah, all that's true. Like I said at the top of the video, training by heart rate's hard. But where is it written that you have to run every single mile throughout your training at one pace? In fact, scientific research has shown that training at slower paces results in faster paces on race day. Another question I hear is specific to Run Disney races. A lot of people will ask me, well, aren't you concerned about getting swept during Goofy because you have to maintain a 16-minute mile? And if you're training at 17, 18-minute miles, aren't you worried about getting swept? No, I'm not, because I'm training in zone 1. On race day, I'm not going to be running much in zone 1. I'm going to be hitting zones 2, zone 3 probably, because I will be excited. Okay, I might even hit zone 4 if I'm sprinting between characters. So all of this training right now is going to have a benefit for me when I get to Disney. Yes, most of the time I am spending those training runs in that easy zone 1, under 150 beats per minute. But I will have some workouts where I'm hitting zone 3, living in zone 4 for a few minutes, maybe even up to zone 5. That's the speed work that will allow me to be faster on race day. I don't have to live up there. And talk about liberating. I don't have to live in those high zones. So working specifically and targeted in those higher zones will help me out on race day if I spend the majority of my training base building. My average paces during training are not indicative of what I'm going to be capable of on race day. And taking on heart rate training just requires that we embrace that concept that slowing down to race faster is going to be so much better for us, especially if it reduces that risk of overtraining and burnout and injury. The bottom line is this, that training by heart rate, that training for the most part, most of your training is in those lower zones, actually results in more PRs than if you were to train at a higher level throughout your training. Now, over on the podcast recently, Jen and I discussed heart rate training and giving you a quick intro into that, and I'm leaving a link to that in the description below if you want to listen to this on your run. And now I'm probably not selling you really hard on the whole heart rate training philosophy, because at the top of the show I said, this is hard, yeah. And I've had people say to me, nah, no, it's not for me. But I would challenge you that it is. If you've ever overtrained, if you've ever been sidelined by injury, if you've ever been so fatigued throughout your training that you can't get out of bed, it's possible that you've been working too hard, that you've been training too hard. So if you slow down and take it easier, how liberating would it be that you don't have to worry about missing a run from fatigue? You don't have to worry about missing a run because of injury. You're taking better care of yourself throughout your training. So when you hit race day, wow, what are you going to be capable of? I would challenge you to try it. Now, I am by no means an expert in this. I know that I've been doing it for a few years, and I've followed some people and some coaches that have helped me through this particular training philosophy. But I am going to leave some links to some resources in the description below, so please check those out. My question for you today is this: did I sell you on this concept at all? Would you be willing to give heart rate training a try? Please leave thoughts, questions, comments, and suggestions in the comment section down below. Over on the podcast this week, we are going to be talking about Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend. We are answering your questions about how to train for Walt Disney World Marathon, how to plan for race day, and all of that. So please check that out as well. I'm leaving a link to the podcast in the description. Another method that is pretty popular is the 80-20 method by Matt Fitzgerald. And there's something else I was going to say with that. Why I went to music school and not art school. I hope this video makes sense. Until I see you next time, go find your, whoa. But guys, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one, guys. Until then, go find your awesome and happy running. Nice, easy, slow. What is my heart rate right now?